Hi everyone, thanks Lane. So what I'm going to talk about today, which is mostly building a great Lean UX team, applies to all size organizations, but it becomes much more challenging when you have an organization the size of IBM, which is 400,000 people. So I think that it should, if you're in a startup, it should apply. It's just a little easier than if you're at IBM. But what I'd like to do today is I'd actually like to start by sharing a tradition from my home country, Catalonia, which is in the northeast of Spain, and it's about human towers or castells, and it's basically the best example I've ever seen of great teamwork. So I figured I would, rather than just talk about it, I'll just show it to you first, and I'm going to be drawing sort of analogies, and I'm going to be referencing it throughout the talk, and it's about 3.5 minutes. If you've never heard Catalan before, you're about to hear it.
De fet, l'única colla que l'ha descarregat i que mai oblidarem el dia que ho vam fer per moltes coses, evidentment la primera perquè era un castell inèdit, però també pel fred que feia, perquè queia fins i tot flocs de neu, perquè el van fer gairebé 2 vegades i la primera els es va despenjar l'enxaneta quan ja el tenien fet. Va ser una jornada certament especial. Aquí tenim el cap de colla, Nani Mates, que per cert té la grip, però avui és un dia com per no quedar-se a casa, no?
Sí, suposo que com a cap de colla i en un dia tan important com avui, ni que estiguessis carregat de febre, doncs voldries estar aquí a la plaça al costat de la teva colla. No?
Doncs ja tenim tot el peu muntat d'aquest 3 de 10 i ara amb rapidesa haurem de decidir si tiren o no, perquè això ja pesa molt, castiga molt.
Pràcticament ara ja el qui té la paraula ja són quarts, que han de veure una mica la seva posició i com se troben allí dalt. Aparentment sembla que està força bé, no es veu o no s'aprecia des d'aquí que hi hagi cap problema en aquesta alçada del castell. I ara a partir d'aquí doncs, bueno, és qüestió de temps i de rapidesa. No? És un castell que si abans hem vist un 2 de 8 lent, aquest doncs, no ha de ser tan lent.
Tira amunt ja a pis de 600, es veu força compacte al peu d'aquest 3 de 10, veurem com correspon. A mesura que s'hi vagi posant pes, a mesura que vagi pujant el tronc.
Sí, ara és això que dèiem, no? Que sobretot al pujar doncs, 600, 700, dosos i la canalla doncs, que no s'encantin, que siguin rapidets. I doncs el folre i les manilles, doncs ara per ara, doncs, simplement és aguantar-se aquí dalt, perquè de treball de moment no en tenen. Tret d'ara,
sí.
que comença ja a haver algun tipus de problema.
I les manilles treballant,
sí,
i encara queda tot el poc de dalt, potser comencen a treballar massa aviat.
És un tal aviat, però bueno, tot és qüestió de que dalt estiguin finats i no es posin nerviosos.
Entren dosos, aquí les tenim. Se senten bastant, eh?
Sí.
Ai, ara una rebrincada important.
Sí, sembla que hi ha hagut una rebrincada just a l'entrada de la canalla, però el que és a baix de l'estructura de moment no se'n ressenteix.
L'acotxador col·locat, el tenen gairebé carregat i el tenen, sí senyor.
Sí, si s'espavilen el tindran carregat, eh?
3 de 10 carregat pels Minyons de Terrassa.
I té pinta, si no s'atabalen, d'arribar bastant avall, eh?
Sí, perquè amb les 2 sufragades que han aguantat,
si han aguantat aquelles dues ara per ara, és molt probable que el descarreguin, eh?
I al Nani Mates se li pot veure l'eufòria, que ell està convençut que el descarreguen, i ho faran.
És ara aquesta sortida que ha de ser tranquil·la i té molt bona pinta.
Ara sí, amb 700 fora. Minyons de Terrassa, que descarreguen el 3 de 10, l'única colla que ho ha fet.
I ho ha tornat a fer després de pràcticament 3 o 4 anys, que ha tornat a descarregar-ho.
Impressionant els Minyons de Terrassa. És curiós perquè només arribar a la plaça, només a trobar-se gent...
So while we watch them being euphoric about this is an amazing achievement, right? I think they're the only team that's ever done this. And last time they did this was 3 or 4 years before this time. It's like huge. And so I really wanted you to see this sort of, rather than me talking about it, because I still get goosebumps every single time I see those kids going up there. It's just like crazy, right? So how does that relate to what I'm going to be talking about today? Really, I think there's just such a powerful analogy for Lean UX teams, and that's sort of the topic of our talk. And before I sort of go right into how you build one, I figured you'd want to know what I mean by Lean UX team. And you know, there's obviously many more things I could say about it, but if I'm trying to synthesize it, it's really, if you know about balanced teams, it's sort of the same idea. It has a lot of the same elements to it. It has perhaps a stronger emphasis on user-centric design and development, so the design thinking piece of that. That's sort of maybe what the main difference between balanced teams and what I'm talking about. And really, what I want to, it's about all these best practices coming from Agile, from Lean Startup, and from user experience, and how that sort of comes all together into one team. So if we think about the video we just saw, right? Do you think we could build an amazing tower with all these heavy, strong, sturdy men? I mean, it wouldn't go very high, right? You need them, but you can't all have the same type of person. Now, if you have a team with all these light, tiny people, that's great, but it's also not going to go very high. So you kind of need the combination of skills and the types of people that their difference is exactly what makes it stronger as a team, right? So that's why for me, it's such a powerful analogy, because you can actually visually see that with the Castellers that we just saw. The user-centric piece, it's really the emphasis on people rather than technology. And while it's a very different type of thing, Castellers is all about the people. The people are building it. So it's like, again, it's such a strong sort of visual reminder of what, in my mind, software development is about the people. Now, just in time, you saw the tower kind of, oh my God, it's going to go down. And the only way you can prevent that is if you're just reacting to the current environment. It's like whatever you have to do, you have a plan, sure. You've rehearsed things many times, but ultimately, it's the here and now. What do I need to do so that we can work as a team? And that's the just-in-time piece of it. And when you add designers to a cross-functional team, what it really means, this lean concept that what it means is, as a designer, you need to unblock development. So you have to let go of perfection, and you have to basically work on low-fidelity artifacts and then iterate. And that's a very different thing than if you worked in a different environment. So that's where the just-in-time piece comes into place. And the last two are really kind of everywhere, right? They're in Agile, Lean. I mean, this is sort of the key. You have to, what's the point of it all? It's to maximize learning, not so much to come up with a great product, which surely it is, but it's the team's learning that's even more important than that. And how do you do that? You have to iterate and validate. And just to follow up with a video, this is one that I put together from a bunch of different, you can see how you're not going to get it right the first time. There's just no way, right? So you have to be prepared and almost plan for failure and embrace failure. And clearly, Castellers is like, everybody knows, everybody's supportive, they're going to fall, it's inevitable. Before they even manage to do this thing and build it and then sort of unmount it correctly, there's going to be many cases where they don't make it. And people are still applauding, supporting the team. It's expected, and it's the only way it could possibly work, right? So that's about embracing failure. Another nice image for you. So back to the Lean UX team, why am I even talking to you about this? In my mind, this is a very successful formula that if you get all of these things, you basically can get the right sort of engagement from your employees and the single strongest motivation to be part of these things together, right? So how do you build it? Assuming that you agree this is a great thing to have, how are you going to do this? So I tried to sort of boil it down to three things. The first one, clearly you need somebody who, similar to what this morning Martin was talking about, you have to have a leader of a product that has this vision. In this case, you have to have this leader that has the vision for the team and what the team can do and how they work together as a team. It's almost like an agile coach, but it is an agile coach with this UX sort of know-how and how this all fits together. That's what this is. And if you notice in the video that I showed you first, there is this, did you notice this guy on the ground yelling at the team? That's the leader, that's the cap de colla. You can't really even see him from afar, you just see the tower, but this guy is constantly telling the team and coaching them and orchestrating who's going up, when, the timing, all of that, right? And there's no way the team could do it without this guy. I mean, he's an integral part of the team. So that's another nice analogy there. Then the next thing you're going to need is TShaped Professionals. And again, it's kind of interesting how if you look at the Castellers, they're like this T-shaped form that lets them sort of have enough overlap with the next person so you can build on top of and you sort of rely on each other. And again, to me, it's like, wow, this is kind of interesting. And finally, and something that most people, it's so basic and so obvious that it's like, duh, you really need to have this strong base that's the right culture and the team shared values that will support the tower and all the weight, right? So let's look at each one in detail. About the single lead that's going to be helping the team sort of form and be cohesive, let me just kind of look at the form follows function phrase that Sullivan introduced in the late 80s, I think. Yeah. So we have, not 80s, yeah, 1896, I think that's when it was. So in our world, we look at form, and it's really the team structure. So how's the team organized? And function is really the primary goal or purpose that a lot of the speakers were alluding to earlier today. So if we think about a very common organizational structure you find in mid-size and large companies, and maybe even small companies, although not as much, you have these sort of team. It's still a team working on a product, but they're sort of taking leadership from different functions. So, design has probably a design manager, development has a development manager, and so on. And look at that in contrast with having this, what I call a tower, which really represents this sort of idea of a truly cross-functional team that's in it together, this unified sense of being and purpose. And typically, again, it has this one person that's sort of orchestrating the team. While they might be functional managers that are sort of different for these people, there's still this one person that becomes sort of the coach or the unifying function. So the function being the primary goal, in the case of a very common case is you have these independent goals that are about maximizing everybody's craft. So, the designers want to do their best designs. That's what they get paid for. Developers want to ship as fast as possible with most automation possible. You have QA, they don't want to get any bugs out there, and so on, right? Everybody's trying to do their best, and what's wrong about that? There's nothing wrong. This is what people have been trained to do. However, if you think about that as an ultimate goal versus having this unifying purpose as a team where you're sort of looking beyond your function, but you're sort of, what is it that you're trying to do as a team? So in our case, we want to focus on user delight. And this is ultimately what we're about as a team, right? So if we think about what that does to the team's behavior and sort of what I'm going to call outcome, on the first function A, you have these parallel tracks that they're parallel because they're all sort of trying to go towards the same goal. They're in it together as a team, but they're not completely joined. I mean, everybody's sort of, and some of them might end before the others, and there's a little bit of a coordination problem going on. Versus if you do this right, in the second case, all these lines sort of come together as this unified front that's marching on the same pace, and there's going to the same end goal at the same time, which is really zen and powerful. So I wanted to take a second to walk you through a real world example. I basically started with this idea that what I needed is to have a team that truly believed in user delight as their purpose. This is what we want. And so I went ahead and sort of hired some designers into my development team and built a truly cross-functional team. So I sort of tried on purpose to have everybody in the same team. And then sure enough, we're release comes out. This is this zen feeling where everybody's kind of in it together, and it's just an amazing feeling. Everybody's just so excited, right, to be part of this team. And that was awesome. So more than ever, everybody's convinced, absolutely, this is the function, this is the goal what we want for our team. We have to focus on user delight. However, there was an organizational change that happened that made it so that the functions that were under one person before got kind of split again and went into these different sort of functional organizations. And then what happened, which you might guess if you know Conway's law, is that you sort of got an outcome that was more closer to having these parallel tracks again. And so maybe that's not too surprising to you, but it was surprising to me because the team was actually the same team of people, the same group of people. They had this sort of muscle memory, this inertia from having gone through this together in a way that was very much collaborative and sort of, they knew what that felt like, and they'd worked together before. And what was interesting to me is that, sure, they were reporting into different people, but to me, that just didn't seem to be enough to explain the difference. And what I think the key difference brings me to back to the first secret ingredient, or what I call the secret ingredient for this, which is having this single leader that understands the team's mission and understands how they all sort of collaborate to do this. Like, so with the lack of these, things sort of tend to fall apart, and not so much fall apart, but people kind of go back into their comfort zone of perfecting their craft, which is what they've been trained to do. So it's not by all means like a disaster, but it's not as zen as it was, right? So that's kind of a subtle distinction. So what's number two? Number two, I mentioned, we have the T-shaped designers and developers that the key part of this is they fit in with each other. And so hopefully, I mean, you probably all know what the T-shaped professional is, but if you don't, really what it is you have both this specialized skill that is basically your reason for being in the team a lot of the times. This is like, I'm a visual designer versus I'm a back-end developer, like very specific, craftsmanship type of thing. But then you also have this broader sort of perspective and know-how that lets you collaborate across disciplines with other people. And that's sort of the horizontal bar at the top of the T. And so think about what's going to happen to a person's sort of skill set when you have one function or the other. So if we have these joined function where there's these independent goals, we're actually emphasizing the sort of specialization. So the person might be a T-shaped designer or developer, but we're really putting emphasis on their one primary skill, and we're saying, this is where we want from you. Just do your best at your thing that you know how to do best, and go. Now, if we're looking at this unifying goal, we're sort of putting a lot more emphasis on the actual breadth of your expertise and how you collaborate and how you can work across and outside of your comfort zone. That is what we're sort of trying to draw upon, and that's what we're emphasizing. So I think that's kind of interesting to note. And while I have a list of specialized skills, which you can read once I post it online, I don't think that's very interesting. What's interesting is that there is this productive sort of overlap, sort of joins that happen in teams that make it for really great pairing opportunities and for professional growth. So you're very good at this one thing, and if you only knew a bit more about CSS as a visual designer, you would rule the world. So what are these productive sort of overlaps that are going to make you grow as a professional and make the team better off? So that sort of goes, and that, to summarize, this is the T-shaped designers and developers and testers that complement each other and fit in, which really leads me to the third and almost too basic to be for people to actually pay attention to, which is the culture and the values, right? The shared values. So this is really the glue that holds the team together and what gives it cohesiveness. And most importantly, it's a really key aspect if you're going to be doing any hiring. You have to understand your culture, and you have to know how any hire is going to potentially alter or enhance your culture. In our case, these were our team core values. The most important thing to note about this is not so much the values themselves, but the fact that these were sort of emerging from the team. Nobody had told the team, these must be your values. Like, you have to value these things. It's like the team got together, what do we value? We workshopped, and this is what we came up with. And we all believed in this. And whenever we were hiring people, we would make sure to talk about that and to get people that also shared these values, right? And then this is sort of the bottom-up piece of it. The top-down piece of it is your corporate strategy or culture that needs to be, if you're going to succeed as a team, it needs to support your core values, right? So in our case, I was really lucky that by the time I had been acquired, this IBM Design Thinking initiative was being sort of underway and got launched shortly after that. And it was really a framework for delivering great user experiences, right? So there was a huge cultural shift for IBM, where until now, and we mostly had focused on clients, as actually I think it was Mary that was pointing out, since Gersner, he's refocused the entire company on clients. But if you think about it, at IBM, the client and the user are very seldom the same people, because we have this huge organization, and clients are our buyers, but they're not our users. So if we focus on buyers, that's great, but maybe they're going to buy our software, but are they going to use it? That's a very different problem. So these might seem not huge, but it is a huge change. And as you know, cultural changes are the hardest. And at 400,000 company, that becomes like, yeah, good luck with it. So the way we're doing this is we're actually trying to get everybody, so product management, developers, designers, to sort of stop focusing on features and functionality and like, okay, there's all these parts of the software, and really putting an emphasis on the user and how they're going to be experiencing and interacting with your software. And so this is a massive effort, and I'm not really going to talk about how we do this and all the pieces, although Mary was alluding to this having this unified sort of direction that comes from the military, and we actually have hills that capture that, and I've talked about that in other talks, but I do want to sort of remind that IBM design thinking is essentially like a framework for collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, right? So we have design, of course, is responsible for desirability, and engineering can attest to how feasible that is, and then we, of course, need the business side from product manager, and all of these come together to innovate, right? And so this is at the core of IBM design thinking. And when it comes to hiring team members, you could do it different ways, right? So the team is essentially what makes or breaks a product, especially in startups, but even in bigger companies. Now, you could take the Peter Thiel's approach of saying, we want to maximize alignment, so we're just going to hire people that they're all like each other. There's all these people wearing hoodies, playing the same video games, that you don't even need to talk, because they already know what everybody's thinking. And surely you're going to go fast, probably, right? And you're going to have empathy for each other, so it's going to be great. However, when it comes to sort of innovation and having a Lean UX team, I tend to really prefer something that's much more diverse and has this thoughtful and careful design diversity that will actually not only help with collaboration, but also with creativity. So you have this like significant overlap. Again, remember the sort of Castellers with their T-shape, right? You have this significant overlap. You can build upon each other. You can grow each other. And so you can pair with people as somebody who sits maybe in one of these circles. There's all these directions in which you could grow professionally. But there's this one thing that you know that best than anybody else in the team. And that's the key. And that's what makes you valuable as a team member, right? So this is a much more sort of exciting environment and rich environment for you to grow as a professional and as a team member. So besides hiring, what are other things that can influence the team culture? So we have training and coaching, which mostly I see the lead UX sort of person doing that. And then the orchestrating work is an interesting one, because if you don't do that, if you have nobody orchestrating and figuring out who should be working on what happens is when there is a lot of overlap between team members, they could step on each other's toes rather than complement each other. So, I've just seen that if you sort of abandon or stop orchestrating, chaos can ensue pretty quickly and surprisingly. And then, of course, team building activities. My favorite ones are the informal ones that sort of emerge from the team. And maybe a good sort of example of that is we have a team member who's always late for stand-up. And so one day he's like, okay, I have an idea. The last person that comes to stand up and they're late is going to treat everybody for coffee at our favorite gourmet coffee shop around the corner. And I'm like, hey, awesome. If that's enough to motivate you, I'll take it. Guess what? I mean, not only was it a great motivator for him not to be late, it occasionally allowed the whole team to get out of the building, get coffee, talking. I mean, it's just it's great, right? And those are things that you don't need to make a big deal out of, oh, let's all go and climb together. I mean, that's great too, you should do that, but it's all these little things that make the culture of the team, right? And the shared experiences. So can anybody guess what happens when you don't have this sort of corporate culture that's supporting you or these shared values? And we've talked about this before, and you're probably tired of looking at the Castellers by now, but this is what really happens, right? With a shaky base, there's no hopes that you're going to build a tower on top of it. However, when you have these three things that we were just talking about, so a leader that has this vision for the team, you have this really amazing team of T-shaped professionals that sort of fit in with each other and that know how to collaborate, and then you have the right culture underneath. This is typically what ensues. You have this euphoria and this sense of accomplishment and zen that's kind of hard to beat, actually. And even your customers or your users want to hug you, which you can see here, the people that are looking at the towers are sort of the customers, I guess, or the users. And I think that's how I end my talk.